The night my brother told me to get out of his house, I had just driven 40 minutes in the rain to pick up his kids from soccer practice because he and his wife forgot again. I walked in soaking wet, both kids trailing behind me, cleats squeaking on the hardwood, and my brother was standing in the kitchen with his arms crossed and that look on his face, the one he saved for when he'd already decided something and just needed an audience. "We need to talk," he said. His wife was leaning against the counter. She didn't look at me. I set my keys down. "Let me get the kids settled first." "No." His voice was flat. "Now." The kids shuffled off somewhere behind me. I heard the TV click on in the other room. I stood there in my wet jacket, water dripping off my hair onto the floor I had mopped 2 Saturdays ago, and I waited. "This isn't working anymore," my brother said. "You being here, it's not working." I had been living in their spare bedroom for 7 months. After my apartment flooded and my landlord took 3 weeks to tell me he wasn't going to fix it and wasn't going to refund my deposit either, my brother had called me and said, "Just come stay with us. We have the room, it's fine." So I came. I paid them $600 a month in rent, his idea, not mine. I drove the kids to school on the days his wife had early shifts. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week. I handled the calls with the insurance company when a pipe burst in January because my brother said paperwork gave him headaches. I did all of it without being asked twice. "What's not working?" I asked. His wife made a small sound, something between a sigh and a laugh. My brother looked at the ceiling. "You're too comfortable here," he said. "You were supposed to stay 2 or 3 months. It's been 7. You don't have any urgency. You're just settled. And it's affecting our family dynamic." I stared at him. "I pay you rent. It's not about the money." "Then what is it about?" "It's about the fact," his wife said, still not looking at me, "that my kids are more attached to you than they are to me right now. Lily asked you to come to her spring concert, not me. You." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't asked Lily to invite me. She had slipped a little paper flyer under my door with a smiley face drawn in the corner. "That's not something I did on purpose," I said quietly. "I'm not saying it is." She finally looked up. "I'm saying it is thy." She finally looked up. "I'm saying it's a sign that the balance is off. You've made yourself too at home here and it's time for you to move on." My brother nodded like she'd said something very reasonable and very final. He slid a folded piece of paper across the counter toward me. I picked it up. It was a printed list of apartment complexes within 10 miles, with availability circled in red pen. He had done this in advance. He had sat down and researched and printed and circled while I was driving through the rain to get his children. "We'd like you out by the end of the month," he said. "That gives you 3 weeks. 3 weeks. In this rental market, with my savings still recovering from the deposit I never got back and the moving costs I'd absorbed 7 months ago, I set the paper back down on the counter very carefully. "Okay," I said. That was all I said. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed in my still wet jacket for a long time. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment. It wasn't what you might expect. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was more like the specific loneliness of realizing something you should have understood a long time ago. I had driven 40 minutes in the rain to pick up his children, and he had spent that same hour researching apartments and circling listings in red pen. Those two things couldn't exist in the same world where I was loved. So I let go of the world where I was loved. I found an apartment in 11 days. It was a 3rd-floor unit in a building about 20 minutes away. Small, older, the kind of place where the radiator clicks all night and the bathroom tiles are slightly crooked. But the landlord was a woman named Mrs. Okafor who had a plant on every windowsill and who told me the building was quiet and that she kept it that way. I signed the lease the same afternoon I saw it. I didn't tell my brother until I had the keys in my hand. He seemed surprised that I'd found something so fast. I don't know what he expected. That I would spend 3 weeks looking panicked, asking for extensions, making them feel guilty for giving me a deadline. I didn't give him the satisfaction of that. I packed my things over 2 evenings. I made neat trips to my car, and I was finished before the 3 weeks were up. The morning I left, Lily stood in the hallway in her pajamas, holding her stuffed rabbit, watching me carry out the last box. "Are you coming back?" she asked. "To visit," I said. She nodded very seriously, the way 7-year-olds do when they're filing information away. I hugged her. I hugged her little brother too, who had wandered out half asleep and didn't fully understand what was happening. My brother stood near the door with his hands in his pockets. His wife was still in their bedroom. He said, "Let us know when you're settled." Like I was moving across the country for a job. Like this had been my choice. "Sure," I said. I carried my last box out. I drove away. And I didn't call. Here's what I want to ask you, and I mean this genuinely. If the people in your life only notice your value after you stop being available to them, what does that tell you about how they saw you to begin with? Take a second with that, because I had been asking myself a version of that question for years without ever letting myself sit still long enough to hear the answer. I heard it now. The first week in my apartment, I slept more than I had in months. There was no one's schedule pulling at me in the mornings. No lunches to pack. No insurance calls. No school pickups. No dinners to start before anyone got home. I woke up when I woke up. I made coffee and stood at my window and watched the street below and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was simply quiet. I won't pretend it was all relief. Some nights it was just lonely. I'd sit on the floor eating takeout because I didn't have a table yet, and the apartment felt very large for one person, and I'd think about Lily's face in the hallway. But loneliness and being somewhere wrong are two different feelings, and I knew which one this was. I started running in the mornings. Small thing. But I'd been meaning to for 2 years, and there had always been something else. I updated my resume. I'd been coasting at the same administrative coordinator job for 3 years. Stable, fine, not what I planned on. A colleague had mentioned an operations manager opening at a logistics company downtown. Better title, better pay. The kind of role I'd been circling for a while without letting myself apply because I always had too much on my plate. I applied. In the meantime, I kept my phone on Do Not Disturb during the hours I was unpacking and setting up the apartment. It helped me think. It helped me move efficiently. It became a habit. I didn't reach out to my brother. He didn't reach out either. 11 days went by like that, quiet on both ends. I assumed that was how it was going to go. A slow, mutual drift. I was okay with that. I was building something. Then, on the evening of the 11th day, my phone lit up. A text from my brother, "Hey, Mom had a fall. She's okay, but they're keeping her overnight. Just wanted you to know." I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down and finished making dinner. I know how that sounds. I'm not made of stone. But I also knew what that text was. It wasn't information I could have found out about my mother from our mother. It was a rope, thrown in my direction, to see if I'd grab it and let myself be pulled back into the same position I'd been in before. My mother was fine. He said so himself. I texted back, "Thanks for letting me know. Glad she's okay. I'll call her tomorrow." And I did. I called my mother the next morning. She had tripped on the back step, bruised her hip, spent one night in the hospital for observation. She was home, annoyed, watching game shows and eating soup my brother's wife had dropped off. She sounded like herself. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. She did not ask me why I'd moved out. I did not explain. But things shifted after that. It started with my brother texting more, casually at first, as if we were just checking in. "How's the new place? Kids miss you." Then less casually, "Hey, Mom's follow-up appointment is on Thursday. Could you take her? My wife has work." I had work too. I told him so. He said he'd figure it out. 3 days later his wife called, which she almost never did. She asked how I was settling in, said the kids kept asking when they'd see me, said maybe we could all have dinner soon. Friendly, light, the way people are when they want to seem like nothing happened. I said sure, sometime, let me know. I didn't follow up. The insurance company called about something related to their homeowner's policy. Apparently, they'd listed me as the main contact the previous January when I'd handled the initial claim and never updated it. I called my brother and told him to get that changed. He said he would. He also said, while I had him on the phone, that the kids' spring break was coming up and they'd planned to do a few-day trips, but the logistics were getting complicated. He didn't ask directly. He let the sentence sit there like an invitation I was supposed to complete. I said, "That sounds fun. I hope they have a great break." He was quiet for a second. Then, "Right. Okay." I got the call back about the operations manager position on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk at my current job, and when I saw the number I stepped out into the stairwell to take the call, standing very still on the landing between floors while the hiring manager told me they wanted to offer me the position. The salary was nearly 30% more than what I was making. I said I'd review the formal offer and get back to her by end of week. Then I sat down on the stairs and stayed there for a while, not moving, just breathing. I had been ready for this. But being ready and having it arrive are two different things. I thought about the night I'd stood in that kitchen in my wet jacket, holding that list of circled apartments, saying okay. I thought about the 11 days it took me to find my own place. I thought about the mornings I'd spent running, the application I'd stayed up to polish, the stillness I'd found in the apartment with the crooked tiles and the clicking radiator. Everything I was now was built in the space they'd forced open by pushing me out. Have you ever received news so good that it felt like an answer to a question you'd been carrying for years? Not just good news, but the specific kind that arrives at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right shape, to confirm something you needed confirmed? That's what this was. I wasn't lucky. I had done the work, but it felt like the universe signing a document. I accepted the offer on Thursday. That same evening, my phone started going off. First my brother, twice in a row, then a text. "Hey, call me when you get a chance, kind of urgent." Then his wife. Then, at 9:15, my mother, which was late for her. I let them all go to voicemail. I made tea. I sat on my couch, the one I'd finally bought, and assembled myself on a Sunday afternoon with the windows open, and I listened to the messages one by one. My brother's voicemail. His voice had that controlled quality he used when he was trying not to sound stressed and failing. He said the kids' school had called about some paperwork situation that apparently required notarization and tracking down documents from 2 years ago, and his wife had a work crisis and he needed help getting it sorted. He said he'd tried to do it himself, but the school office kept referring him to a number that didn't work. He said, and here I could hear him recalibrate, he said he missed having me around to help think through things like this. His wife's voicemail, lighter, almost apologetic in tone, though she never said the word sorry. She said the house had felt different since I left. She said Lily had asked twice that week if I was upset with her. She said she thought maybe they'd all handled the transition poorly and she hoped I was doing okay. My mother's voicemail, she didn't mention any of this. She just wanted to tell me she'd seen an ad for a cooking class nearby and thought we could do it together if I was interested, that she'd been feeling like we hadn't had enough just us time lately. Her voice was warm and ordinary, and it made my chest hurt in the particular way that things do when they're uncomplicated. I called my mother back right then. We talked for 20 minutes. I told her the cooking class sounded nice. We made tentative plans. She didn't ask about my brother. I didn't mention him either. I texted my brother, "Can't help with the paperwork situation, I have a full week. Try calling the district office directly. They usually have someone who can help navigate document issues. Hope it works out." I put my phone on the charger and went to bed. The calls didn't stop that week. Or the next. Over the following 21 days, I counted, eventually, because the number started to feel significant, I received 47 missed calls between my brother and his wife, plus text messages I stopped counting after 30. They ranged in tone from casual to strained to, in a few cases, genuinely confused, as if they were slowly working backward through something and hadn't gotten to the answer yet. One evening I sat with all of them. The messages, the calls, the small escalations, and I tried to locate inside myself some satisfaction. I'd expected to find it. I thought the calls would feel like vindication. like arithmetic resolving itself, but mostly I felt something quieter than that. Not angry, not triumphant, just clear. I understood now what I hadn't let myself understand before. I had been the system that held things together, not because I was needed in the way that someone who is loved is needed, but in the way that infrastructure is needed. You don't think about it until it fails. You don't wonder if it's tired. You just expect it to be there. And once it's gone, you make a lot of calls. I didn't answer most of them. I'm not going to pretend I answered all of them and handled it with grace and communicated perfectly. I let the calls go. I let the text sit, not to punish anyone. Because I was busy building the life I should have been building years ago, and answering those calls would have required me to step back into a role I was done playing. There's a difference between being cruel and being finished. I was finished. I started the new job on a Monday. Mrs. Okafor knocked on my door that morning with a small succulent in a terracotta pot. A welcome to 3 months gift, she said, because that's when tenants stop being new and start being neighbors. I set it on my windowsill next to the coffee maker and it's still there. My first week at the new job was the kind of hard that reminds you you're alive. Different systems, new people to read. The particular exhaustion of learning how a place works from the inside. I came home each night and ate dinner and went to sleep and my brain sorted through the day. There was no secondary life running underneath it, no one else's schedule nesting inside my own, just mine. My brother texted on a Friday evening, "I don't understand why you're doing this. We're your family." I read it, I set the phone down, I picked it back up. I know, I wrote back, "I just finally understand what that word means for me now." He didn't respond to that, neither of us followed up. My mother and I did the cooking class. It was a Tuesday night in a church basement that smelled like old wood and tomato sauce, and the instructor was a retired woman named Glenda who had opinions about olive oil that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. My mother laughed more in 2 hours than I'd heard her laugh in months. We drove home talking about it and she squeezed my hand at a red light and said, "We should do this every month." I said yes. Some things don't resolve. I want to be honest about that. My relationship with my brother is still. I don't know what it is, cordial and careful when we see each other at family things. He knows something shifted and I think he's not entirely sure what he's sorry for, which means the apology hasn't quite arrived yet. Maybe it will. I'm not waiting for it. I stopped waiting for things from people who have shown me who they are. His daughter Lily texted me last month. His wife gave her my number apparently, and asked if I wanted to come see her spring concert. She said she'd saved me a seat in case. I went. I sat in the 3rd row and watched her play 3 songs on the recorder, 2 of which were actually recognizable. She waved at me from the stage. I waved back. Afterward we got ice cream, just the 2 of us, with her parents' permission, and she told me very seriously about a drama situation in her 2nd grade class involving a borrowed eraser and a broken friendship that had since been repaired. That's what I want to hold on to, not the 47 calls, not the paperwork texts, not my brother's face the night he slid that list across the counter while I was still dripping on his floor. Just a kid waving at me from a stage, and ice cream, and the specific piece of having a life that belongs entirely to you. The best response to being shown your place is not an argument. It is not a confrontation. It is not even an explanation. It is simply going somewhere better and building something they cannot follow you into. I found that somewhere. I built that something. And my phone? It has notifications off now. I check it when I want to, not when it tells me to. That, maybe, is the truest version of what it means to finally leave. There's something I've come to understand about the way life works, not through anything mystical, but through simple, observable cause and effect. What you give your energy to grows. What you neglect decays. And the people who take without noticing always, eventually, notice the taking, but only once you've stopped. For years I was the kind of person who showed up. I drove in the rain, I handled the calls nobody wanted to handle, I packed the lunches and stayed late and asked for nothing in return because I told myself that's just what you do for family. And in some deep, unexamined place, I believed that all of it was being seen, that the people I was showing up for were quietly aware of what I was carrying, and that one day that awareness would translate into something real. It didn't. It rarely does, when the arrangement is invisible to one side. What I learned. What I think every person in a situation like mine eventually has to reckon with is that staying in a place that diminishes you doesn't make you noble, it makes you available. And being available when you're in the wrong room with the wrong people is not a virtue, it's a habit dressed up as one. The moment I said, okay, and walked out with my wet jacket still on, I wasn't being cold, I was finally being honest. Honest about what the situation was. Honest about what I deserved. And honest, maybe most painfully, about the fact that I had let it go on so long because changing it required me to stop waiting for someone else to notice I was worth more. Nobody was going to notice. That was the truth I had to carry out with my last box. But here is the part that matters. The moment I stopped waiting, I started building. The apartment with the crooked tiles. The morning runs. The application I stayed up too late to polish. The job offer that arrived exactly when I needed proof that I hadn't been wrong about myself. None of that was luck. It was what happens when a person stops dividing their energy between their own life and the maintenance of everyone else's comfort. Courage, I think, is mostly just deciding to take your own life seriously. Intelligence is knowing the difference between a situation you can fix and one you need to leave. And character, real character, is not proved in the dramatic moments. It's proved in the quiet ones, when you can make a scene and instead you just pick up your box and walk out the door. Lily waving at me from that stage. That's what I hold on to. Not the 47 calls, not my brother's confusion. Not any of it, just that small hand in the air and the knowledge that I got there on my own terms, in my own life, that I had built by myself, for myself, one steady choice at a time. Whatever was taken from you, whatever room you were made to feel small in, you don't have to fix it. You don't have to explain it. You just have to leave it behind and refuse to let it define the ceiling of what you build next. That's the whole lesson. Everything else is just detail.